2023 just began and the UFC already has some fresh fights cooking for us. One of those fights is a potential matchup between the notorious one, Conor McGregor, and everyone's favorite good guy, Michael Chandler. This is definitely a big money fight for Chandler, while on the other hand, Conor McGregor would desperately be looking for a win to dramatically make his way back to the lightweight division rankings and into the UFC. So who's got the advantage in this one? How does this fight potentially go? And what's next if either guy gets the win? There are a lot of questions to be answered in this video, so just stick around and let's talk about them. Now, the first question we'd be answering in regards to this fight isn't who we think will win or when it holds, if it ever holds, of course. Rather, the right question to start off with is when is Conor McGregor coming back? We all know about his little USADA testing pool scandal and how he hasn't been tested by USADA in the last 6 months. So it's kinda hard to say at this point to pick out a date when he'll finally show up again. And even though we're quite certain it will be in 2023, we still can't place a date. But anyway, if he does come back, Dana White said he thinks it would be fun to see him go up against Michael Chandler. Now, why Michael Chandler? Well, the first thing is Chandler is a very exciting fighter and would be a very good test for Conor on his return. Apart from the fact that Chandler called out McGregor after his win against Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler is the only guy in the top 5 right now that seems to be a pretty good match for Conor. Of course, there's Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira on that list, but Charles might have his eyes set on a rematch with the champ Islam Makhachev, while Islam seems to want to crack at Beneil Dariush in a fight that both men have wanted for so long. But I doubt anyone would want to see another Conor versus Poirier fight right now. However, what if we're looking at the wrong side of things? Like from recent photos circulated around the internet, Conor McGregor looks like if he stepped on a scale, he'll be way above the maximum weight needed to be in the lightweight division. He looks like he weighs at least 170 or even 190 pounds right now, meaning we might see Conor move up to the welterweight division. So the truth is no one really knows where Conor's head's at or what the UFC even has planned for him. However, if he does come back and gets the fight with Michael Chandler, we highly doubt Chandler wouldn't make the best of that opportunity. Like, just think for a second, Michael Chandler, for some reason, hasn't been able to fully maximize his potential in the UFC. If you look at his performances before he got into the UFC, you'd see a totally different guy from the one we see now. Maybe his age is telling on him, maybe the UFC has a deadlier set of fighters, or maybe his glory days are behind him. We can't really say. But what we can say is if Chandler fights Conor using the same strategy he used against Dustin Poirier at UFC 281, then there's a 100% chance he defeats Conor. We want you to take a moment and think back on that fight. Chandler came out as explosive as ever, taking the fight straight to Dustin. You could see in his eyes, his movement, and in his power that he was ready to do anything to get the win. And even though he eventually lost, Michael Chandler really gave it his all. And let's say you don't think that fight against Dustin Poirier is enough to prove his chances of defeating Conor McGregor, then maybe we need to go a little farther back to his days under Bellator MMA. Just in case you didn't know, Chandler is a former 3-time Bellator lightweight world champion. But before you come out with the narrative that the UFC probably has more talented fighters than those in Bellator MMA, you need to realize that Chandler actually defeated some big names in Bellator. Big names like Patrick E. Pitbull and Brent Primus. But for some reason, Michael Chandler hasn't had what you'd call an impressive career in the UFC so far. He joined the promotion in 2021 and has had only 2 wins in 6 fights. However, in those 6 fights, he's put up some exciting performances that have earned him both performance bonuses and also a Fight of the Year award by different media outlets. Now, enough of all the talking, let's talk about how this fight is looking on paper. The first thing you should know is that this fight will be a typical Chandler affair, and that's a stand-up fight. Conor McGregor is very dominant on his feet, and so is Chandler, even though he comes from a very solid wrestling background. We believe that could be Chandler's little advantage here, just in case things begin to get out of control while he's on his feet. But on the other hand, McGregor is very good with his takedown defenses. He's been choked out only twice in his career, from his fights with Nate Diaz and Khabib Nurmagomedov, 2 of the best grapplers the UFC has ever seen. And just in case Michael Chandler actually decides to grapple, Conor McGregor won't easily get dominated, cause his grappling is pretty solid to some extent. We think that's a part of his fight game that most people underestimate. Conor is a jiu-jitsu brown belt. He earned this belt under his coach John Kavanagh back in 2014 after his win over Dustin Poirier. But regardless of that, Chandler and McGregor are always charged with that explosive fist power, so we highly doubt the fight would go to the ground. Another thing to consider here is that Conor McGregor hasn't been in a pro fight for up to 16 months. So what if that factor somehow affects his cardio and overall performance? And if this is a 3-round fight, Michael Chandler doesn't need to outrightly beat him. All he needs to do is outpoint him, and he'll get the win. Realistically speaking, that should be easy, right? Well, before you answer that question, we hate to burst your bubbles at this point, but Dana White kinda shut down plans for this fight. During the UFC post-fight press conference of UFC 281, he said, and I quote, "I never said that, ever fucking once." They said, "So if Conor McGregor came back right now, who would you be looking at as an opponent?" I said, "Well, if he did, if that happened, and that scenario played out right now, Chandler would be a fun fight." Never fucking once did I say Conor McGregor versus Chandler. I don't even know when Conor McGregor is coming back, and this is why I don't like to answer these kinds of questions. Because some fucking idiot somewhere on the internet puts out that that's what I said, and it's not even remotely close to what I said. While it does kind of sound like Dana White did indeed put Chandler forward as a fun fight for McGregor's return, it's important to note White's use of deflection tactics in his answers. When he says that would be a fun fight, it doesn't mean the bout is being planned or on the books. Just like when he says it makes sense that a certain fighter would get a title shot with a win. It doesn't mean they actually will. But remember, Dana White has debunked a few fights in the past that still ended up making their way through, so this one right here might not be any different. And the whole reason why almost everyone got hooked on the possibility of this fight happening in the first place is that it was posted by a really credible source, and that source was ESPN. ESPN is literally the UFC's trusted broadcaster, so how is anyone supposed to know it wasn't a close to done deal? But maybe the reason why Dana White shut down talks of it so easily is because there's still Conor's USADA testing pool scandal. For us to even deliberate his return to the UFC, Conor has to find a way to get past USADA. Most recently, McGregor himself hinted at a possible exemption from the USADA testing pool by exploiting a loophole in the terms of agreement between the UFC, the fighters, and USADA. This loophole is a policy that would allow a fighter to retire, use illegal substances, get clean, and then return to fighting without breaking any rules. However, the drug testing body has now moved to close that loophole after TJ Dillashaw, who has been banned for doping, retired following a nasty shoulder injury he sustained at UFC 280. But as of the time of making this video, McGregor is still in the works of using this little loophole to his advantage, which if he actually does, just shows how much influence he has on the sport and in the promotion. So let's say he does get exempted from the required 6-month testing period. Let's say he does face Michael Chandler and gets the win. What's next for McGregor? Obviously, a lot of guys would suggest a potential fight between Conor and Islam for the lightweight title as a kind of sequel to the Khabib-Conor fight of 2018. But for some reason, we don't think Conor would be headed in that direction just yet. He might take a fight against Charles Oliveira, with the winner going up to become the #1 contender for the title. But at the end of the day, both Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor need a win badly. So maybe Conor McGregor gets exempted from the USADA testing pool. Maybe the UFC eventually approves the fight. And maybe, just maybe, you'll like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on our future videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!